The losing is internal. This needs to be established immediately because the external presentation, the composed, self-sufficient, apparently unaffected presentation that the avoidant maintains with the practiced efficiency of someone who has been producing it across every significant relational event of their adult life, will not reflect the internal losing. The avoidant who is losing their mind in response to the evidence of you loving someone else looks from the outside like someone who is fine, who has processed the change in your circumstances with the characteristic equanimity of a person who genuinely does not need much and therefore is not devastated by much, who may even, in the immediate social context where the evidence is encountered, produce the composed, warm, entirely appropriate response of someone who is genuinely happy for you. The losing is happening underneath this, in the interior, in the monitoring system that is receiving the evidence of you with someone else and producing the specific, priority level, management system overwhelming response that no amount of composed exterior can entirely prevent from affecting the quality of the avoidance experience in the moments immediately following the encounter and in the hours and days that follow. The losing is real. The composure is the management working at maximum capacity against it. The gap between the two is enormous, and the gap is precisely what this piece is about. The management system, across the entire history of the connection and its aftermath, has been calibrated on a specific background assumption. The assumption has been examined in multiple previous pieces, but its specific operation in this context deserves direct examination. The assumption is not consciously held. It does not present itself in the avoidance interior as a thought that can be examined and questioned. It functions as the operational premise beneath every other thought, the thing that is simply taken as given, that structures the avoidance experience of the relational landscape without being explicitly registered as an assumption rather than as a fact. The assumption is you are available, not available in the transactional sense of someone who is actively seeking engagement, available in the deeper sense of someone whose interior orientation still includes the avoidant as a significant presence, who has not genuinely, completely, at the cellular level of someone whose emotional investment has been redirected, given that investment to someone else, who is living their life forward perhaps, but carrying something oriented toward the avoidant in the background of the living. This assumption is the structural underpinning of the avoidant's ongoing interior stability relative to the connection. It does not require active maintenance because it is not experienced as an assumption that requires maintenance. It is experienced as a feature of the landscape. You are somewhere. The orientation is somewhere. The investment is somewhere. And wherever it is not entirely, completely, at the foundational level of someone who has genuinely given themselves to another person elsewhere. The seeing of you loving someone else destroys the assumption, not gradually, in the specific, instantaneous, no transitional period way of something that the management system was not calibrated to handle because it was not calibrated on the possibility of the assumption's complete elimination. The evidence arrives and the assumption is gone. And the assumption being gone is not the simple elimination of a belief. It is the elimination of a structural element that the avoidance interior stability was, without the avoidant fully registering this, resting on. What happens when a structural element is suddenly removed is not a gradual adjustment. It is the specific, immediate, affecting everything above it consequence of something foundational no longer being there. The avoidance interior, losing the assumption in the moment of the evidence's arrival, does not simply update a belief and continue operating with equivalent stability. It destabilizes. In the specific, below conscious, the management is now working against this rather than from this way of someone whose interior foundation has just been significantly altered. The destabilization has immediate effects, not visible effects. The management deploys with urgency, with the full capacity response of a system that is managing against a significant interior event. but effects that are present in the quality of the avoidance interior experience in the moments following the evidence's arrival, in the specific management-consuming, resource-depleting way of something that is requiring the management to work much harder than its ordinary baseline operation. The immediate effect is the flood, the specific, unbidden, arriving without permission quality of the full interior response to the evidence, breaking through the management's capacity to modulate it to an acceptable level in the first moments of receipt. The monitoring system has just received the highest priority signal available, the signal that the specific, significant, irreplaceable person whose permanent interior presence has been a constant of the avoidance relational landscape since the connection formed is now genuinely, visibly, completely with someone else. The flood contains several things simultaneously. The grief, the specific, particular, irreplaceable, thing is being lost grief of someone who is encountering, in the most direct possible form, the evidence of what the distance and the management and the pattern have produced as their final, undeniable consequence. The jealousy, not the ordinary passing jealousy of mild preference for someone's continued attention, but the specific, territorial. This is a significant lost jealousy of someone who has genuine attachment to you and is watching that attachment's object direct its investment towards someone else. The regret, the too late realization in its most acute form, arriving not as the quiet, background level carrying of the earlier pieces, but as the specific, urgent, now made undeniable weight of someone who is watching the concrete evidence of what the pattern cost materialize in front of them. And beneath all of these, the specific disorienting quality of the losing itself, the losing of the assumption, the losing of the structural stability it provided, the losing of the orientation of a significant interior element that the avoidant was not consciously tracking, but was continuously drawing on. The management deploys against all of this simultaneously, with the urgency of a system that is managing against a multi-front, high-priority interior event, rather than the ordinary, single-front, manageable priority inputs it is calibrated for. The deployment is visible in its costs, even when the specific content of what is being managed is not visible. The conversation that is too carefully normal. The engagement with the evidence that is too precisely calibrated to the appropriate level of warmth and good wishing that a former partner's genuine well-being deserves. Too precise, too calibrated, in the specific way of someone who is working very hard to produce the appropriate response rather than simply feeling it. The departure from the encounter that comes slightly too soon or with slightly too much purpose. The management producing the exit before the flood exceeds the management's containment capacity. The aftermath is more revealing. The period following the encounter with the evidence is the period when the management's full capacity deployment has the most visible effects. The specific, resource-depleted quality of the avoidant in the hours following the encounter. The distraction that is more pronounced than usual. The concentration that is less available. The ordinary pleasures of the day that are less accessible. The specific below-conscious, management-consuming preoccupation that is occupying the interior at the priority level that significant interior events always occupy. And the night that follows the encounter with the evidence of you loving someone else, is one of the avoidant's most interior honest nights. The management has been running at full capacity for the hours since the encounter. The resources are depleted. The nighttime reduction of the management's operational capacity arrives against the backdrop of a full capacity day's expenditure. The interior, in the specific, honest, management-depleted quality of this night, is available to itself in a way it rarely is. What it contains in this availability is the full, unmodulated, management-free experience of the losing. The grief and the jealousy and the regret and the disorientation of the assumption's elimination, arriving at their actual size without the management's modulation, keeping them at the tolerable level. This is why the losing is called losing their mind, not the literal clinical sense, the specific, interior, management-exceeding sense of someone whose ordinary capacity to keep the interior at a managed level has been temporarily, significantly exceeded by the combined force of what the evidence of you loving someone else produced. The mind that is lost is the managed mind. The composed, self-sufficient, requiring nothing, not devastated by relational loss mind that the management has been across the entire history of the connection and its aftermath, constructing and maintaining and presenting to the world and, in significant degree, to the avoidant themselves. That mind does not survive the encounter with the evidence of you loving someone else intact. Not permanently, the management will reassemble, the narrative will accommodate, the composed exterior will be restored with the practiced efficiency of a system that has been through significant interior events before and has always, eventually, managed to reconstruct the surface. But in the period between the encounter and the reassembly, the mind that was managed is genuinely lost. What remains in its place is the actual mind, the interior that has been managed against since long before you arrived in the avoidance life. The mind that carries the grief and the jealousy and the regret and the loss of the assumption and the specific flooding, management exceeding response to the evidence of you loving someone else. The mind that is, in this moment, as honest as the avoidance interior gets. That mind knows exactly what the evidence of you loving someone else means, knows the significance of what the pattern cost, knows the irreplaceability of what was lost, knows with the specific, management-free clarity of someone whose interior is available to its own honest content, that the person loving you now, with the consistency and the presence and the daily choosing that the avoidance management prevented the avoidant from providing ergen, is the person receiving what you always deserved, and that the avoidant, who deserved to be that person and whose fear prevented them from being that person, is watching the evidence of this from the specific, permanent management will eventually reassemble, but the knowing will remain interior position of someone who finally, completely, without any remaining protection from the full weight of it, knows what they lost and cannot unknow it, and will not, across all the management that follows, be entirely free of the knowing again.